Is Elon Musk walking in the footsteps of Machiavelli? In today's world, where tech overlords dominate the headlines, we dive deep into an unexpected comparison. Tech CEOs and one of history's most misunderstood philosophers, Niccolo Machiavelli. When I started to think about this video's idea, I thought that Machiavelli teaches leaders to be ruthless and pragmatic, the ends justify the means type. Suddenly, my brain made a random connection with Elon Musk, and I thought that he's the ideal archetype of a leader for Machiavelli. He'd be proud of Musk. I did not know that this train of thought was going to make me fall down a rabbit hole. It turns out, Machiavelli and tech CEOs have way more in common than I thought. Machiavelli is one of the most popular political philosophers of all time, but what you might not know is that he is beloved in business strategy and leadership circles. If you look up Machiavelli plus business in any leading online bookstore, you'll see tons of books related to this. Machiavelli on leadership, Machiavelli on management, Machiavelli marketing and management, original. Heck, there's even self-help books like The Princessa, Machiavelli for women. But it's pretty creepy that people idolize a person that has a negative trait named after him in the field of personality psychology. Machiavellianism. Machiavelli. This is the name of a personality trait characterized by interpersonal manipulation, indifference to morality, lack of empathy, and a strategic focus on self-interest. Wait, this applies really well to our modern tech overlords. Okay, so tech CEOs are just textbook Machiavellian leaders? Video over? Well, no. Apparently, I was wrong about Machiavelli, and there's tons of new research and interpretations that showcase Machiavelli as someone who values trustworthiness, fairness, and the importance of maintaining strong relationships in leadership roles. These findings made me dig even deeper. The essence of Machiavelli's teachings for today's CEOs and wannabe leaders comes from The Prince, his most popular book that's about power dynamics and political strategy. It was actually intended to be a manual for rulers. But The Prince isn't the only book Machiavelli has written. He's done a lot of different genres, from military strategy in The Art of War to historical analysis in the history of Florence. He's even done poetry and theater, like his plays Mandragola. But in the Discourses of the first 10 books of Titus Livius, wow, that's a title, we can see a Machiavelli that thinks way different from the one in The Prince. In the book, he talks about the importance of republic governments, he advocates for liberty, participatory democracy, and a commitment to the common good through civic virtues. Now, we have an interesting situation on our hands. It's like we have two Machiavellis, one that's widely known and accepted by business people, the ruthless pragmatist, and we also have the republic and civic virtue loving one, the new Machiavelli, created by academics. And I wasn't the only one who noticed this. George Briggs, a professor from the Business University of states that business books about Machiavelli might not get into all the complex details of his ideas, but they do highlight a key part of what he believed: questioning traditional moral standards. According to Briggs, this questioning fits well with Machiavelli's Republican ideals, which he talks about in another one of his works, The Discourses. But even there, he supports the pragmatic leadership lessons he gives in The Prince. If we really want to get to the bottom of this disagreement and find out if CEOs like the Zuck, Musk, and Bezos really fit the bill of Machiavelli's optimal leader, we have to find out how Machiavelli would advise to run a business. But before we start taking any business advice from Machiavelli, we have to find out what he thinks is the key trait of a successful leader. For this and the rest of the video, we come back to the source of the oh so many grind-set Sigma male business books, The Prince. How a leader acquires and maintains power is the biggest theme of the first half of the book. But it turns out that the person who masters the art of ruling doesn't have a specific method, skill set, or technique, but is actually the pinnacle of virtue. Wait, you're telling me that the guy who is used as a metaphor for being an immoral person is claiming that virtue is the key for leadership success? Chill out, my guy. Machiavelli actually uses the word virtù, which is Italian for virtue, but translators have usually replaced this word with things like skill, ability, sometimes courage, valor, strength or purpose, or even manliness. The reason? Well, one can guess that this is because of the morally startling implications of what Machiavelli actually defines as a virtue. But stick around, because we will uncover what Machiavelli actually thinks is a virtuous person. As I've mentioned before, Machiavelli covers various ways of gaining and wielding power, but his analysis reaches its apex when he covers the creation of new principalities, where both the leader and the regime are entirely new creations. The scenario parallels the startup of a company in the business world. Machiavelli says that creating something new is super tough. Why? Well, because you're up against people who liked things just the way they were. And it's not just the people who were getting a sweet deal from the existing system, it's also because most people are naturally wary of anything new and different. Machiavelli states that success of founders doesn't come from fortune or luck, but, you guessed it, virtue. Machiavelli explains that virtue is an excellence of character and ability that enables leaders to overcome obstacles. He illustrates this with historical figures such as Moses, Theseus, and Romulus, all who founded entire nations and cultures through their exceptional virtue. In short, founding a nation is the pinnacle of virtue for Machiavelli. In today's tech industry, figures like Musk, Bezos, Zuckerberg all encompass the dream of the tech CEO. Well, dream/nightmare, depends on how you look at it. Musk has revolutionized sectors from space exploration to electric vehicles. Zuckerberg has defined social interactions with Facebook, now Meta, and Bezos, well, he turned a bookstore to an online cloud computing and retail powerhouse. Just as past innovators have reshaped their worlds, these CEOs demonstrated vision, perseverance, innovation, illustrating Machiavelli's virtues by fundamentally altering commerce and communication. So okay, first points from Machiavelli to the tech CEOs. Hey, if you feel like you like this video so far, click subscribe. It helps keep the tech overlords happy. Machiavelli explores why founding is considered the pinnacle of virtue, even if it means playing in the gray areas of right and wrong. He begins by saying that the desire to acquire is a natural human instinct. But when someone channels this drive into creating something new, overcoming significant challenges along the way, society tends to view this achievement as particularly admirable. Essentially, if you manage to succeed, people will often overlook the methods you used, focusing instead on the success itself. That's why Machiavelli touches on how starting something new, like a business or government, might lead you to morally questionable tactics. He points out that founders often face tough choices and might need to make controversial decisions to keep their ventures afloat. However, he argues that if these founders end up successful, society tends to forgive and forget the moral oopsie-daisies, focusing instead on the achievements. A perfect example is Bezos' baby, Amazon. Sure, Amazon has become a powerhouse in both retail and cloud computing, but it's not without its problems, especially when it comes to how it treats its warehouse workers. Reports and investigations, like those from the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, have pointed out tough conditions in Amazon warehouses across the US, from New York to Idaho. These places have more injuries than Amazon's competitors, and there are issues with safety practices and reporting injuries. Workers have shared their worries about the company focusing too much on getting things done fast, which makes their jobs unsafe. They're also scared of getting in trouble if they speak up. This chase for profits at the cost of worker safety has made many people upset, including the government, labor groups, and the workers themselves. Even with all these serious concerns, most people don't seem too bothered. the convenience and quick service Amazon offers often overshadow the ethical issues behind how it operates. This situation shows what Machiavelli said about how things seem versus how they are. The public is so impressed by Amazon services that they tend to ignore the not-so-good ways it achieves success. I mean, Machiavelli's morals kinda make sense if you look at one of his main influences, the ancient historian Polybius. He argues that moral norms like justice are just human constructs created over time. These norms were formed from the understanding that treating others as we wish to be treated promotes mutual benefit and social unity. This view suggests that virtue isn't an absolute concept, but rather a flexible one, and it's defined by actions and outcomes that serve the community's interests and ensure its cohesion. Viewed this way, it's obvious why the founder represents the pinnacle of virtue. It's not necessarily because their actions are moral, it's because they channel human desire and ambition into creating something that goes beyond personal gain, and it offers benefits to the wider community and society at large. It's the ability to make a positive, lasting change against all odds that gives the founder's actions a certain kind of Machiavellian virtue that earns them admiration and respect across time. I won't go into in-depth critique of Machiavelli's ideas and positions. I actually want to hear what you think about them in the comments down below. From talking about founders being the best, Machiavelli shifts his focus to a crucial comparison between classic virtues and what he calls the effectual truth, the practical realities that steer actions in the real world, as opposed to ideal virtues like generosity, kindness, loyalty, and honesty. Machiavelli thinks that sticking to conventional morality can get in the way of success, especially in politics and, in our case, business. Machiavelli is fully aware that there's a discrepancy between how people live and how they should live. That's why he argues that being a goody two-shoes will just lead to a leader's downfall. Machiavelli warns leaders that in the world of politics and business, the people who act ethically are at risk of being exploited by others who don't care as much about silly morals. This is what Machiavelli's virtù stands on. It states that leaders should respect traditional moral values when possible, but they should also be ready to get their hands dirty from time to time if they want to be successful and maintain power in their field. Speaking about getting your hands dirty, let's talk about one of the best tools a leader actually has: cruelty. In today's world, the idea of cruelty shocks people, and we're much more likely to value kindness and mercy. Machiavelli, however, challenges us to think differently about these virtues, suggesting that their worth actually depends on their application. He believes that misplaced mercy can hinder necessary actions that might prevent further issues, proposing that sometimes the truly merciful path involves making tough decisions early to prevent greater problems, benefiting the majority, even if it's harsh for a few. Machiavelli critiques excessive leniency, particularly with subordinates, and he uses a historical example for emphasis. He shares a story about the actions of Ramiro de Orco, a ruthless enforcer hired by Cesare Borgia, a cunning and ambitious ruler from the notorious Borgia family, known for their political machinations during the Renaissance. Borgia tasked de Orco with restoring order in Romagna, a region plagued with lawlessness. De Orco achieved this through brutal methods, quickly establishing control, but also earning public hatred. To distance himself from this cruelty and prevent De Orco from being too powerful, Borgia unalived De Orco in Minecraft in a gruesome, public manner. This act left the people both satisfied that justice was served and stunned by Borgia's ruthlessness. What Machiavelli is trying to teach is that the timing and manner of implementing cruelty and kindness is important. It's like the old school honey and vinegar method, but it may involve unaliving someone? He argues that acts of cruelty should be done as fast as possible, whereas kindness should be distributed in small and ongoing gestures to maintain and grow appreciation over time. This principle can be applied to leadership and management. For instance, business leaders might want to offer small, regular incentives to employees rather than large, infrequent ones, and when necessary, merge difficult decisions like layoffs into a single, decisive action to avoid a long time of unrest and resentment. Dear old Musk's handling of Twitter after his acquisition in November 2022 perfectly shows what Machiavelli had in mind. Musk initiated sweeping layoffs, affecting roughly half of Twitter's workforce, and implemented drastic policy changes, including the termination of contractors and employees who criticized him. He also had a pretty funny Sigma Goggins moment where he sent out an email ultimatum for employees to commit to extremely hardcore work. Who's gonna carry the boats at Twitter, right? This whole Twitter roller coaster perfectly showcases the Machiavellian tactic of swift and impactful actions that transform organizations. And while these moves were harsh, they were aimed at cutting costs and aligning the company with Musk's vision for Twitter 2.0. They show Machiavelli's idea that being a good leader sometimes requires making hard and unpopular decisions to avoid bigger problems. Machiavelli says that tough actions need to be made quick and clear so people eventually move on. But I guess Twitter's transformation is taking its sweet time. Machiavelli might still have some notes for Musk, but he would praise his work overall. If being cruel as a leader from time to time is okay, this raises an age-old question. Is it better to be loved or feared? Machiavelli suggests that ideally, a leader would have both love and fear from their followers. But when pushed to choose, being feared is more advantageous than being loved. Love, according to Machiavelli, makes followers too unpredictable and beyond the leader's control, whereas fear ensures their obedience. This principle becomes very clear in hard times when sacrifices are needed. People may claim loyalty and love in the good times, but are quick to turn away when the situation darkens, showcasing what Machiavelli sees as the unreliable nature of humanity: ungrateful, inconsistent, and self-interested. Machiavelli's stance might seem harsh at first, but it's a pretty interesting take, especially if you compare it to the likes of Cicero's older views. Who's Cicero? Well, he's a big name in Roman politics and philosophy, who actually argued long before Machiavelli that you can use love to form strong bonds even in hard times. He also thought that leading with fear could actually backfire and lead to hatred and the possibility of rebellion. However, Machiavelli counters this and says that you can lead with fear without being disliked if you're just fair and just. This means punishing only when necessary, not exploiting your power for personal gain, and not cheating people out of their money. By being fair and treating people right, Machiavelli believes that you can avoid hatred that Cicero talked about, and still lean on the side of fear if you need to. Mark Zuckerberg's way of leading Meta seems to follow a Machiavellian idea, choosing fear over love to motivate his team. This came out in a lawsuit that showed emails from 2016 where Zuckerberg pushed his teams to figure out how to get around Snapchat's security to see their users' data. Very ethical. He gave a direct order: you should figure out how to do this. That shows that the Zuck is all about getting results fast. This kind of straight to the point talk might work to get things done, but it does make you wonder about the rightness of it all and how it makes his team feel. However, it's pretty much what Machiavelli said about using fear wisely to keep things on track. Zuckerberg's way, as revealed by those emails, is a real-life example of using fear in leadership, even if it might not be the best for everyone involved. Okay, so we've learned that a bit of threatening and psychological abuse is pretty okay when you're running a business. Happens to the best of us, right? Anyway, what's next, Machiavelli? Don't keep all of this rich sociopathic knowledge to yourself. Honesty is the best policy, right? Apparently not. Honesty is to be avoided, according to Machiavelli. He acknowledges that most people think that honesty and promise-keeping is not absolute, like the example of someone hiding a Jewish family in the 1940s not needing to tell the truth to a Nazi officer. Machiavelli would agree to this, but it actually comes from a perspective of self-preservation for leaders. In an ideal scenario where people are honest and truth-telling, promise-keeping and telling the truth is viable. However, Machiavelli believes that there's real-world competition where people are constantly trying to seek personal advantage, making absolute faithfulness impractical. So leaders might need to lie or break promises if it serves their interest. Machiavelli emphasizes men in general judge more by their eyes than by their hands. Everyone sees how you appear, few touch what you are, suggesting that appearances often eclipse reality. Yet, he warns that this approach has its limits, especially in the realm of business. Our reputation as a liar or someone unfaithful to their word can lead to isolation. While politics might allow for manipulation based on public perception, business dealings demand trust and scrutiny, as financial stakes prompt a deeper look beyond simple appearances. This is why Machiavelli says to respect traditional moral values, but at the same time, he praises virtù. He explains that moral virtues are a good tool to keep up appearances, while virtù is about the gritty reality of being a leader who can forget morals and then hide it well enough to avoid making people mad or stir up any trouble. In general, he lists out that leaders should be perceived as determined, brave, reliable, rather than indecisive, unreliable, or weak. Leaders should also keep a low profile on their day-to-day tasks, so when they do something big, it really stands out. And doing something big and standing out is really important for Machiavelli, and he thinks that seeking fame is a really valuable activity for a leader. Why? Because fame brings attention to a leader's greatness. This makes a lot of sense, considering fame is probably one of the most important resources to the tech CEO. The freaky reality is that their popularity and public image affects the value of their company's stock. You might remember the silly moment when Elon Musk smoked the devil's lettuce on Joe Rogan's podcast and Tesla's stock fell by 9%. But not everything is measured in stock. Sometimes it's just about knocking each other out. Musk and Zuckerberg were supposed to fight in a cage match, but sadly or gladly, that didn't happen. Anyway, tech CEOs know that popularity means power, so they chase it. Machiavelli approves. I've dived deep into The Prince and covered most of the tips for leaders, and what I found out sort of surprised me. I started with a simple idea. Machiavelli, known for his ruthlessness and pragmatism, might like Musk, Zuck, and Bezos as leaders. But this thought led me down a rabbit hole that showed Machiavelli is more complex than his public image. I saw two sides of him, the Prince Machiavelli, known for cold pragmatism, and the one who wrote the Discourses, which promoted republicanism and the common good. It was like trying to make sense of two completely different people. The deeper I went, the more it seemed like these two sides could coexist. He doesn't actually pit his support for republics against his advice for leaders. Instead, he weaves these two into his concept of virtù, and the tech overlords of our era are great representations of virtù. Their pioneering visions and sometimes immoral methods seem to embody the core of Machiavelli's teachings. To the public, they're seen as innovators making the world better, but in private, they make hard and unethical decisions, like Machiavelli advises. This journey showed me that the two sides of Machiavelli, the pragmatic strategist and the advocate for virtuous republicanism, are just two sides of the same coin that showcase the complexity of being a leader. Hey, if you like philosophical type videos like this one, you should check out my other video on Nietzsche and his unexpected love of dance.